Dude, I know that Sigourney Weaver is hot, but control yourself. With the release of Underwater coming up, I think it's time to take a look at a quintessential science fiction classic. One that's not just science fiction, but horror related as well. Let's talk about Alien. See? Similar premises. Crew of contract workers, hostile and claustrophobic environment, scary monster. It fits. And also, yeah, I'm taking another stab at this sort of thing again. Alien is a great movie and all, but in what way is it important? How did it influence the medium of film and our culture? Why should anybody give it a watch, regardless if they like film or not? Let me list a few reasons as to why in this old segment with the new name, Pop Culture Flicks. See? Hopefully it sticks. And that I don't kill it when it's barely had a chance to walk. Boy howdy folks, this is the part of the video where I get to introduce Ridley Scott's Alien to people who don't really know all that much about it. Aren't they in for a surprise? Taking place in the 22nd century, fancy I know, it's about a group of astronauts who encounter an SOS message on their way back to Earth after picking up some mineral ore on a far-by planet. Ooh! They reroute their ship to save whomever sent the transmission, only to find an alien spacecraft that has long since crashed, with its extraterrestrial crew having died from mysterious circumstances. Well, given what they were carrying... One of the human astronauts gets implanted with an alien monster that grows into something hideous and dangerous. With their spaceship returning to Earth and with a predator on the loose in their quarters, it's up to the crew to figure out how to kill the creature and survive the trip home. Directed by Ridley Scott and written by science fiction and horror screenwriter Dan O'Bannon, Alien released to theaters in 1979 to a mixed, and some would say repulsed, reaction, but garnered success with critics and ultimately made 20th Century Fox money. So there's that. Now that I explained it to you, let me spoil things and give my reasons as to why Alien is considered a culturally significant film, and also to see if that sort of praise is totally deserved. Alien does deserve it, but I have a video to make. Let's continue. Reason number 1. Alien is one of the most notable examples of science fiction horror on film. If you haven't seen Alien before, what I just described and showed just sounds like a monster movie in a spaceship. And that's not really wrong, but there's more to Alien than that. Alien is shot as a horror movie. It's often labeled as a thriller and is pretty light on the science fiction aspects, or at least they are not in the focus. It does not spend a whole great deal of time giving a backstory to the crashed ship, the planetoid, the deceased aliens, or the alien monster featured in the film. What is described is only what matters to the story and what Alien sets out to be. Yeah, of course it alludes to these things, and yes, they did make plenty of sequel and tie-in to flesh out the universe of Alien. The environments are dark, damp, and foreboding. Almost all of the cast gets picked off one by one, and, not to mention, it's in space. An environment where humans aren't known for easily surviving in. One really has to wonder if this film factors into the slasher movie boom of the 80s in a way, even though Alien doesn't get lumped up with Halloween or Friday the 13th, so much as it does with Predator and other science fiction works made around that time. The most admirable thing about Alien is that it marries a horror movie with a science fiction setting. It creates something new that honors and respects both. Elements of the horror genre have always been paired with science fiction and fantasy elements, but this is where it felt effective, with a strong emphasis on the horror. Number 2. It takes elements from many different science fiction stories and puts them on film. While Alien felt fresh in an age where science fiction films were a hot thing to make, it does have its influences. Lovecraft and other films made in the decades before are obvious, but there are other influences like EC Comics and their stories of aliens eating out people. I mean aliens eating their way out of people. I know I'm beginning to sound like a broken record, but that's the thing in art. New pieces are made up of new stuff sitting on a base of familiar stuff. It's just sometimes the ratio of new stuff to familiar stuff is different. There is a lot I just said in my comment about EC Comics. Let's move on to the completely horrifying way and not the horrifyingly sexual way. This is going to be a weird video. Number 3. The Chestburster Scene is iconic. While the Chestburster isn't the first alien organism we see in the film, its introduction is one of the most horrifying. This scene absolutely repulsed moviegoers in 1979 and continues to do so to this day. It's nasty, sudden, terrifying, and impactful. This scene and the action of the alien bursting out of the chest of its host is often parodied and is commonly cited as one of the most shocking scenes in cinema. It's absolutely repulsive, I happen to say gleefully. It's repulsive to most of us, but attractive to some. In that case, I can't help you. I can't help anyone. Number 4. The alien creature is one of the best movie monsters ever. This bastard is still iconic as an adult, let alone as a mangy little thing. The alien is in the shadows of the ship for most of the movie, but when you do see it, it's dang intimidating. The design of the alien, its different forms, and similar elements of the film were designed by a fantasy artist by the name of H.R. Giger. Although his work was considered too weird and macabre for the film by 20th Century Fox initially, he was considered a crucial aesthetic element by the movie's creative crew. Giger's work seems so out there and dark. It's perfect for a film like the original Alien. The creature definitely earns that title, even though future films and media would label this species as Xenomorphs. It's a monster design that has stuck within our popular culture, so much so that it's been referenced and appropriated in other films, television shows, comics, and video games. I can think of other monsters showing up in this way, but only a few. Number 5. Alien has notable and uncomfortable gender and sexual themes. Another important thing I would like to bring up about Alien is that of its themes of gender and sexuality. How it plays into its science fiction setting. Sci-Fi is certainly no stranger in dabbling with the topics of sexuality and such. Alien is notable because it's a film made with that aspect in mind. It almost wrote the textbook on using sexual motifs in science fiction horror films. The original Alien has spawned so much analysis on its portrayal of women like Weaver's Ellen Ripley, in addition to the other aspects of the alien in the film. Ugh, John Hurt does not get treated well here. Look, the subject matter here might be a little intense for what I'm trying to go for in this video. Creative choices in the movie and with the alien itself were made to feed off the sexuality-based fears of anybody who watches it. Well, any adult anyway. You see what I mean? Let me take the low road and point out the creature's long head and long tail and wet, wide, and scary mouth. Maybe there's a reason babies scream after plopping out of their mother. Number 6. It's first of many science fiction films to come out after Star Wars. That's post 1977.
I got him! Great kid! Don't get cocky!
Alien is notable in the fact that it was one of the first in a big wave of science fiction blockbusters to come out after the massive success of Star Wars in the late 70s and early to mid 80s. The story of how the first Alien movie was made consists of different elements and people coming together, but here's an interesting factoid. 20th Century Fox didn't want to spend the money to make a science fiction movie like the one that was pitched. Once Star Wars came out and made gangbusters around the world and for the studio, they quickly changed their tune and almost greenlit the film immediately. Alien, along with its 1986 sequel Aliens, now stand as some of the best science fiction blockbuster films of that era. It's a great example of cashing in on a craze but offering something unique and new at the same time. I'm looking at you, Disney's black hole. What even are you? Number 7. It influenced other science fiction works in the years to come. Almost every dang element about Alien was adapted into other science fiction works over time. Many lower budget and derivative films released in the early half of the 1980s but other creators were a bit more careful with their inspiration. A big example that comes to my mind is Nintendo's Metroid series, its first game being on the original Nintendo Entertainment System about 8 years after the release of Alien. The similarities are fascinating, considering that this was the house of Super Mario we're talking about. Maybe that's the old gaming nerd inside of me, though. It just proves that nothing is original and that we're just a bunch of rip-off artists entertaining ourselves with nothing until we die to be forgotten. What? Okay, that does lead me to my next point, though. Number 8. Alien is a rare, mainstream negative portrayal of space exploration in science fiction.
Bring back life form. Priority 1. All other priorities rescinded.
If I may throw my own hat into the ring for a second, more so than I've already been doing, I think one of the more interesting aspects of Alien is that the first movie is very pessimistic about the future and how space exploration could be terribly exploited. Let me explain. When comparing Alien to something like Star Wars or even Star Trek, which I think would be the better example, but anyway, Alien is a bummer sci-fi future. There's no sense of optimism. Space travel takes months, and it doesn't seem immediately cool or fun. Yay. In space, there's nothing but companies and spaceships going about their business. Space travel in Alien is sort of like sailing across the sea in our real-world history. Star Trek had the same idea, and while that future is not without its problems, it has a mindset that was of its decade, with the space race and stuff like that. Big corporations in the world of Alien are unfriendly and show an unaccountable attitude towards their contractors.
Damn company. What about our lives, you son of a bitch?
I repeat, all other priorities are rescinded.
Ian Holmes' Ash character is revealed to be an android who was placed on the ship to retrieve the alien and take it back to Earth to be studied and weaponized. Films like Alien and even John Carpenter's The Thing were criticized early on as having a very negative view of extraterrestrial life, compared to films like E.T. I feel that Alien is a small but crucial point in media history. It represents the beginning of a shift where the future was starting to be perceived as bleak. Or at least that idea began to fascinate moviegoers and storytellers enough to be explored in movies like Alien. The film is also very Lovecraftian. It's just not as racist. What do you have against people, HP? We just like your cosmic tentacle daddy. For what it's worth, even though that Alien has an evil corporation in it, I wouldn't necessarily call the film cyberpunk. That's Blade Runner you're thinking of. Now here's the list of reasons of Alien's cultural importance that aren't as important as the others, but still deserve to be briefly talked about here. Alien is an important milestone for Ridley Scott, Sigourney Weaver, H.R. Giger, and others. Ridley Scott went on to become a big-name director after the success of Alien. He has continued to direct movies in the 40 years since Alien, with quality about all over the place. Alien was also the big break for Sigourney Weaver, who was in her mid-20s during the production of the film. So much so that she returned for several of the sequels and has starred in films like Ghostbusters, partially due to her success in Alien. She is sometimes often dubbed the Queen of Sci-Fi due to this, and she cameos in other things that pay homage to her roles from time to time.
Well, what do you know? Small world.
Her role as Ripley in Alien and Aliens helped set the standard for badass women in science fiction and fantasy work, but we will expand on that when we eventually get to Aliens. H.R. Giger's design certainly got some recognition after Alien. He continued being a fantasy illustrator and designer for additional projects until his passing in 2014. Dan O'Bannon, who helped conceptualize the story of the film, went on to do more screenwriting work before his death in 2009. Gotta do a video on him sometime. After all of this, Alien has been widely received as one of the best films ever made, most certainly of the 1970s. It launched a multimedia franchise that has spawned comics, toys, and merchandise. The series would be followed by Aliens in 1986, which is also great and just as influential and important as the first, in addition to a third and fourth film and some prequels of varying levels of quality. The series even crossovered with the Predator franchise, where the signature species of both series fought it out. The two films are both pretty silly, but I would recommend watching the first crossover film. It's an enjoyable watch. The film was chosen to be preserved by the United States Library of Congress due to its historical, aesthetical, or cultural significance. See? It's art, dang it. Art. Since the late 90s, there have been rumblings of even more Alien films being made after several attempts to get a continuation off the ground, even with Disney's acquisition of 20th Century Fox. Knowing today's Hollywood business, I think we'll see Alien return in some form. Whether it'll be any good is up to, well, a lot of different people. Heck yeah, my man! Alien is a really great science fiction film and horror story. It's expertly designed and directed. It's tense and atmospheric as hell. The original Alien, released in 1979, deserves all of the praise it has gotten over the years. It's one of my favorites, even though I'm not a super diehard fan of the series. It really offered something different in a time where outer space was just beginning to be looked at as the final frontier. That different being the idea that nature is not always working towards our best interests, even out in the coldness of space. Alien is proof that just because you're cashing in doesn't mean you should sell out. Finally, we're here. We got the video done. What do you think about Alien? Is it as great? Do you think it's influenced our culture in a way? Leave a comment below, and maybe like and subscribe if you enjoy the videos. I really appreciate it. Hey, until next time, I'm MaximumAustin, and remember to be confident, and you enjoy your day. 2020! The alien cannot see because it has no eyes.